I got the call saying, yeah, do you want to fight? I went, yeah.
So usually on these Fridays, we come and react to a presser for a pay-per-view. Yeah. And generally speaking, like, we have a nice time watching all the hype that they're building for the final countdown for the pay-per-view. But here we are, Friday morning, no press conference. And actually, I only found out that last night. I was like, oh, what time's it going to be on? Let's stick it on. No.
Poured yourself a big glass of whiskey, didn't you?
Huge glass of whiskey, a mega pint.
And then it was
12 a.m.
Yeah. Exactly.
What are you going to do now?
Mega pint of wine. And no, it wasn't on. Is this a reflection of the fact that the UFC are just kind of like, let's just fucking get this over and done with, get it, and just kind of a collateral of the UFC 300 and being like, let's just get this blow past as quickly as possible.
Maybe they just couldn't be bothered to translate the whole thing.
Well, yeah, if you think about it, like, who on there was going to bring anything that was interesting? Steve Erceg doesn't talk. Most of the people I'm interested in don't speak English. Kyle Baralio is really interesting as a prospect. Vitor Petrino, of course, Aldo is the big star. Yeah, I think the press conference, to be fair, if they did hold it, would be talking about just like how big of a stinker it was. I think they probably made the right move, but it's an indication of how this card really just doesn't have anywhere near the star power. I mean, we're talking about a pay-per-view here. We're talking about people wanting to shell out their cash for a card. It just doesn't have a lot of what makes people tend to want to do that.
The fights there are some good fights on here, but it's all very respectful matchups. Like Paul Craig, Baralio, that's super respectful. Martinez, Aldo, that's really intense, but it's like a martial arts level of like intensity. No one's trash talking.
So you think, wait, hold on. So you think when martial arts is respectful, they don't need press conference?
Well, I'm just saying, like, they're not going to talk. Like
Have you
Jason
seen
said.
a boxing press conference?
Like,
they're so boring.
These guys.
Well, I mean, GSP did plenty of press conferences.
Sure.
Randy Couture.
All right,
You know?
I see your point. Maybe they should just promote the show and talk about how good the fight is. No one's going to talk shit or do anything, are they? Because there's a lot of respect going around between all these guys. So.
Yeah.
Dana White would have just stood there super bored, just kind of like...
Dana White wouldn't have done it.
Dana White wouldn't have
Brazil. No, exactly.
Yeah, they would have got like Paul Felder or someone to just like fill in. Like, they've done that before.
Get in
on the commentary.
They do that sometimes. I know not every fight needs this because it's just about the test of their skills, right? But there is no storylines really going into this. The only storyline is, can a relatively green guy go in and win the belt against a guy that has all the experience and all the wins against his whole division?
Yeah, Anthony Smith versus Vitor Petrino. I'm very hyped on Vitor Petrino.
I don't know. I think that just gets Petrino into the top 15.
Yeah, so that's some stakes.
I think it gets him into the... What is Anthony Smith ranked right now? I think he gets into the top 10.
He's in the top 50. He might be in the top
Anthony
10.
Smith is still in the top 10.
Yeah, probably.
Well, yeah.
Michel Pereira, I don't know what Ihor Potieria does for him, but Michel Pereira has been on a hot streak.
Yeah.
So it's like another one does a lot for him.
It does feel like they are slightly punishing Pereira still for missing weight that time. It's like, why is that guy not fighting a ranked opponent?
Yeah.
Like, for real. He's so good, and he's like on a 6-fight win streak or something now, and it's just like, give him someone ranked who's clearly that caliber and has been for a long time. Ever since he stopped fucking around doing all the flips and stuff, he's looked really good. But the thing that gets me with this card especially is that there isn't many ranked fighters at all. I think the top 2 fights, there's ranked fighters, and then the rest of them is all unranked. It doesn't mean there's going to be bad fights, but it's like, for my interest, like I was saying, with the stakes, with the thing, it doesn't like, it's not grasping me.
Karolina Kowalkiewicz is inside the top 50.
I don't
but
care.
I disagree with you because I think a lot of the Brazilians have actually got tough matchups. Not a lot. Some of them have got good fights. Some of them have got some tough fights, like Joaquim Silva versus Drakkar Klose. That's a really tough fight right there. Even Elvis Brenner's got a bit of a tough fight. Kowalkiewicz versus Lucindo.
I didn't say layups. I mean more star making or time to show off their skills.
It's about 50-50 though. I think there's a bit of both.
Let me be clear. This card is actually, believe it or not, I know a lot of people don't recognize the names on here. It's fucking great.
Yeah, some really good fights.
The problem with it is they're charging 70. What it was 75 in the US. Sorry, I've lived in the UK for so long now.
Something like that. I think it's 80.
Could have got you $10
But they're
off.
charging a fuck ton of cash for a card that people don't want to pay for. This is an amazing fight night. Fucking outstanding fight night. Pay-per-view wise, pretty lackluster. I mean, what do we pay pay-per-view prices for? We pay it to see big stars. We tune in weekly to see the normal rank and file talent get their shot at, making their way up the card. And that's what this card is. It's those people getting their shot and working their way up the card.
It's a shame because you could argue that this is a really unfortunate thing for those guys to get this opportunity to fight on a pay-per-view that should have been a Pereira pay-per-view.
Yeah.
You're sending the newest, biggest star in there with Pereira in front of his home crowd in a big fight against Jamal. If he did what he did to Jamal Hill at 301 in front of Brazil, it would go crazy. And maybe these fights on the undercard here, you would have had star-making moments. You're like, oh shit, did you see that guy who did this on the Pereira card? But unfortunately, it's just a card that doesn't have that star power at the top to give those guys the shine.
Is it a disservice to see somebody like Vitor Petrino, who's a big star coming out, Caio Borralho, Michel Pereira, these star-making potential performances where only about 80,000 people are actually watching it live?
Exactly, yeah. That's the whole point of having a big headliner, is that they get the rub.
When you don't have that star power, why are you buying a pay-per-view? You're buying it because you feel like you can't miss it. And dude, I already know a bunch of you are going to tell us that you're bootlegging it. I know. We're not talking about that. We're talking about like that. Yes, you would still be bootlegging it even if it was a great card. Let's be honest. We're not talking about the people bootlegging it. We're talking about the normal size of the audience.
It's more about the question of, like, for us staying up to 6 a.m. Are we going to do that? I know I'm not.
That's what I was going to say for this one. I mean, one of the advantages is it feels like I don't need to watch it live. I don't have to see it.
Because there's no stakes.
Exactly. So you can just, a bit more of a relaxed weekend, you can just watch it afterwards. So.
Well, I'll probably stay up for it. I'm actually really excited for this card. I just wouldn't pay $70 for it.
Yeah.
If I were in the States, would I be paying $70 for it now?
But if Steve Erceg goes out there and puts on an incredible performance, there's going to be a lot of interest on that guy, even if a lot of people didn't watch it.
It also opens up that division again as well, right? Because the whole reason he's fighting... The whole reason he's fighting Erceg is because there is no one for him that they feel is value of booking right now or is available.
Do you think this will be one of those pay-per-views where Dana White then comes out with a little package about everyone who doubted 301 as well afterwards? It turns out to be amazing. Just like MMA on point, dude.
Just does that with every pay-per-view from now on. 302, 303, 304.
The thing about that criticism that people will sometimes say, oh yeah, like why would you say this card is bad when the fight's delivered? Well, because it was bad on paper. That's all people are criticizing. They're not saying these fights can't be amazing. What they're saying is you're asking for $70 for a card that doesn't have that pay-per-view star value. It just doesn't, And you're relying on luck in that case. This could be awful as well. And will they be talking about that when they're making those hype trailers and saying, oh yeah, you criticized it, you guys were completely right? Of course they won't say that. There is an entire possibility that this card could be a stinker. Pantoja loses in the same way that Glover did, and the entire audience leaves during his post-fight speech.
Yeah, there's some good prospects here, but if they're off one night, or they have a shitter and they get beat, or they get caught by something, it's kind of like, well, like you said, it's a lot of luck going into a pay-per-view because you think they're going to be great fights.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what people pay for. They pay for fights that they feel they can't miss. And generally, it's not the hardcores. I think all the hardcores are going to see this. What it really comes down to is the casual fan base. I mean, those are where the buys come from. I remember when Ronda Rousey fought Betch Correia. I remember there being absolutely zero hype for that fight among the fan base, the hardcore fan base. What you would see on Twitter, what you would see on YouTube comments, etc. But then you saw the pay-per-views come out, and you were like, "That sold over 1 million. What the fuck?" We all know who these guys are as hardcore fans. The problem is you're not doing anything to detract that. And if you are a hardcore fan, you're being punished in the United States, particularly with a $70 pay-per-view.
It's just a shame there's no Charlie Olives or Pereira.
That's the thing. Like, obviously, there was a reason they were going back to Brazil, because they were going back to Brazil with Pereira.
Yeah, that's true.
The biggest fucking star in the UFC at the moment. But to cut that out, literally, honestly, the entire reason you go to Brazil and you cut that out, like, holy shit, like, was it worth it? If you're looking at 300, we had the fucking Max Holloway knockout. If that happened as the main event or the co-main event, do you reckon we would have been happy with that? Everyone was so upset about not having this big fucking main event of 300. But actually, in hindsight, do you think they could have got away with 300 to save 301 by keeping Pereira where he was originally supposed to.
Maybe they kind of overpromised themselves into a corner.
Yeah.
And then they kind of had this weird rule where we can't have the BMF as the main event, even though they've done that plenty of times before. So it's kind of weird that they felt like they needed another championship fight above that.
I mean, this card is the biggest collateral. I can't remember a time before where they have essentially sacrificed the Brazilian card for 300, right?
Well, what was 201? It was Lawler versus Woodley. I can't remember what 101 was. But yeah, it's like they've usually done a pretty good job of making sure the card right after is still in pretty good shape. And to be fair, again, I'll say it again, this is a great card.
I think it's just the main
event, doesn't
right?
have star value enough to ask people to pay $70. It just doesn't have that. You know, it hasn't been talked about in a while, and I'm curious to follow up on what those reports initially said. But when ESPN first bought the UFC's licensing deal, one of the reports that came out was that the equivalent for every pay-per-view that they do now is essentially akin to about 500,000 pay-per-view buys, because they're getting a guaranteed amount from ESPN. They don't depend on the pay-per-view business. And I think this is probably one of the, you want to say it's collateral from 300. Sure, definitely. This might be collateral as well of the ESPN deal. Would they have done this?
Yeah.
Would they have done this back when they were primarily a TV and pay-per-view marketed company? Would they have stacked a card like this? There's a good chance we get what happened at UFC 196, the original 196. They turned Verdum versus Kane when that got canceled into a fight night. Like McGregor versus Nate Diaz, which was originally 197, or it was Dos Anjos at the time. That's what I think would be happening with this card about, let's say 8-10 years ago.
If it just turns out to be like a dreadful night and nobody has that star-making performance, does the UFC then punish those guys? They can't fucking sell and they suck. So put them back on the prelims of a fight night. Do you know what I mean? It's like...
Maybe.
It's like we've put you in a scenario where you don't have a main event star, and this is all now down to you to go out there, have blockbuster fights and perform. And if you don't, then fuck you.
Can you pull up the UFC's YouTube channel? Because on that point of the UFC has to know. Yeah. Because the countdown's done so poorly. I watched the countdown earlier this week, but I haven't cared to really watch any of the embeddeds myself. Yeah. The embeddeds have done really poorly. I mean, these are probably the worst embedded numbers I've ever seen. Yeah, 15 hours,
they had
not
to put
even 100K.
Kovalevich in a bikini on the fucking thumbnail.
Oh my god, they did as well. Well, no, I think the UFC.
Fighting. Don't worry.
The UFC have a TV deal, don't they? And they kind of don't give a fuck because they're going on that process of they're going to be great fights. What are you complaining about? And it's exactly your point, Jason, the fact that they are riding on that. And it's kind of like, well, this is what we are, the UFC, and this is what you're getting.
If you present a pay-per-view like this to the audience that shells out money for it, eventually the quality of the product is not going to reflect your interest to spend money. So this can't be a precedence where we are continuously talking about the lack of star power on every other pay-per-view or every fifth pay-per-view, because you're going to start to lose your audience that do pay the money.
Well, if you were a UFC 300 fan, you just watched Max Holloway's insane knockout. You watched what Pereira did, and you're like, oh, great, what's going on next week? I want to watch the next card. Who's on it? It's like, oh.
We do also have to remember, and it's very difficult, like with personality types and things, the onus is so much on... The onus is a lot on the fighters to do the majority of the work of promoting themselves, because that's the deal they've been given. And if you're not a guy to go out there and call your shots and be a character, you don't have to shit talk, but just be a character people that can get invested in. If you go out there and have a middling performance, or you have a strict game plan to wrestle fuck a guy to get the win, people aren't going to tune in. People aren't going to be interested in that because they want to see fat knockouts. And that's the case. But sorry, it's like... Even though, we're going, there's no star power, Dana's fucked us here, because we've got to pay for it. But also, it's like, we might see some mental shit.
But also, like, in regards to the fat knockouts as well, it's just like, there is that. But also, like, wrestling can be extraordinarily fun.
Of course.
And those ground battles can be, Fedor versus Big Nog was fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
But also, who's one of the biggest fucking stars in the UFC right now? fucking Chimaev.
Exactly.
Chimaev's only had one fucking mental one against Gilbert Burns, but the fact he goes out there against Kevin Holland, he goes out there.
The thing is that Chimaev will
Li
go
Jing
there.
Liang fight was like the dude just fucking.
Chimaev will wrestle you, be incredibly dominant, and then choke you out within the first round.
Yeah, that's what we need.
And then get on the mic and shout, "I'm going to kill everyone. I'm going to kill everyone in the audience.
That's what you need. If
murder."
that is your style, you need to be confident in your style to go and fuck people up, like Bo Nickel is doing. He goes in there and he fucks people up with wrestling.
I don't know. Well,
but he does.
I don't know.
He does. He's all over you.
Yeah,
he scrambles and he finds the choke. And
he is,
fucking,
but I don't know if he
chokes you on
people up.
That's the way
it's
we
should
be.
A little sexual, this podcast.
That's honestly
now,
how we should be we should be talking about like groundwork in fighting. It's the idea that you're gonna fucking smother that guy, you're gonna fucking choke that fucker out, or you're gonna break a fucking arm, or you're gonna break a fucking
Frank
knee.
Mir.
Also, you get the opposite when Sterling moves up to 45 on 300 and then just like strategically nullifies everything Calvin Kattar can do. And yes, to a martial arts brain, that's impeccable. That's like, wow, he's managed to do that. But to us as fans, even though we had a lot on that card to look forward to, it's kind of like sucked the wind out of it because unfortunately, there's a lot of entertainment tied up in the sport. And it's like, you want to be entertained.
Yeah, none of us would be here if fighting wasn't entertaining. You're absolutely right about that. And like you can... I mean, I'm one of those purists that I say, who cares if we are entertained or not, to a certain extent, obviously, though. If it was like that for every single fight, I wouldn't be a fan of the sport.
If we had Carla and Rose headlining if we had that main event every time, I'd be like, I wouldn't want, the range management in Carla versus Rose was incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be like, no, that'd be just fucking awful, and I would stop being a fan.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, people want to see people dominate. They want to see people go for it. It's like, this is true in gaming. You could be watching fucking Fortnite and people want to see the person that isn't, hiding around the edges and waits until everyone dies. They want to see the person that goes in there and just bodies everybody.
Yeah.
That is true in literally everything. People want to see excellence. They want to see bravery, courage, like whatever you want to say. They want to see amount of talent that is just above their peers be showcased. If nothing else, they want to see a knockout drag out back and forth. They want to see something happen, something amazing happen. To kind of put a button on this, again, this card is actually a great card.
Yeah.
I think we could see some real crowning moments in this. It's overall above anything else. At least my point is, it's a shame a lot of people won't be watching it. You'll have the bootleggers. Yes, we acknowledge you. We know you're there. And we have the few people that will actually be buying this. And it's like you said, a lot of you won't be staying up in other countries to necessarily watch it all night. So I think as a result of it not having the star power, the feeling that you can't miss this card, you miss out a lot.
All right, lads. Well, 52, 53, 54 minutes, Zach, there. And if you want to watch the whole unedited version of that, where we kind of disintegrate into the meta of not only life but mixed martial arts, you can by joining the membership program for as little as $2.99. So,
which is much cheaper than the pay-per-view. Save your money there.
Yeah.
Join the membership.
What we're saying is, don't buy the pay-per-view this weekend. Buy a year's worth of memberships, and you still won't even come close to the price of the pay-per-view.
Very true.
Also, big shout out to Nathaniel Wood for supplying us with the Prospect apparel. My favourite hoodie, actually. So,
I actually was going to wear mine today.
Why didn't you?
Because bright turquoise, and I didn't want
to. You didn't want to clash with me.
Yeah.
So I've worn mine on here before. I've got the joggers on today as well.
Oh yeah. Do you jog in them?
Oh,
I do. I actually do use them as
no chafe, zero chafe.
Zero chafe, very comfortable.
There you go. Zero chafe, Nathaniel Wood.